I saw a post of yours on an expat forum, and you're a counsellor. You're currently located in Guatemala, I understand.
That's
And
right.
one of your areas of specialty is helping people who are moving to another country in
Mhm.
regards to how they're going, I guess, emotionally and psychologically. And it really caught my eye because it's something I've thought constantly about since making the move over 3 years ago, because I think it's one of the big missing links. We all think about all of the logistics, about the finances and everything else when we're moving to another country. But the one that often we don't think about enough to our detriment is the psychological impact of moving. And it's such a big topic. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you joining me. And I just wanted to, off the bat, ask you, what are you seeing in regards to, because you speak to a lot of people and help
Mhm.
them with that transition. What are the things that people are struggling with, and what are the common themes that you're seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big ones is that when people move to a new country, they're moving out of their normal environment, moving out of their normal culture. They're leaving their friends and family behind. Maybe they are, in a new place where all these things are foreign. And yeah, it really impacts on their identity basically, because our identity is often shaped by our environment, our culture, and our relationships and our work. And so when you basically move to a new country, you have to start reshaping your identity and letting go of parts of yourself that you didn't realize you would have to let go of, and finding new parts of yourself. And so it's a quite a big transition in terms of who you are basically. And yeah, that's one of the big challenges.
Mm,
I would say that another one is like that kind of loss and grief, like another theme. So like um again, for the parts of yourself that you have to leave behind, or friendships that are not going to be as close now, or not being able to grow up and see younger family members grow up or be there while older family members are aging. So that's something that's a big part of the kind of immigrant experience, I would say, is grief and loss, and also
mm,
guilt comes up a lot, surrounding that sort of I'm not there, I'm not being there for people left behind.
mm,
um yeah, and I guess, but also for the self in the new environment, that is also can be quite a bit of a um having to find a new sense of meaning, a purpose in life, having to find yourself again. It's like almost like a existential crisis sometimes,
yeah,
like, who am I in this new place?
because it sort of reminds me of the Truman Show. You didn't see what happened to him when he walked out the door
Mm,
to reality. But
right. Yeah.
I did wonder about that, and that really is that's what we've done. We've walked through the door to that new life that's totally left behind everything that we identified with. And identity is such a big thing because I guess on the face of it, we just think of identity as, oh yeah, that's the way I talk and think and what I do and what I like. But your identity is very much connected with what's around you. And when that's taken away, there is like a really profound sense of kind of lost, but you're sort of not sure what you've lost. And then I think for some of us, we eventually come to the reality, oh, that's right. Um, I'm just not in I'm not in the place that I once called home. And it's such a big thing. It sounds kind of trite, I guess, but it's really massive. And I know I've been through it and many
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like we are displaced,
Mm,
because when we're in our original place of where we're from, a lot of things are familiar. A lot of, we have memories there, we have connections there, we know how things work. And then you're in a new place and you're outside of all of that, and everything's foreign. So yeah, it takes a lot of adjustment to really get used to that and to find a sense of belonging. But it is something that can take a long time and may never even feel like you fully belong, kind of like always the foreigner.
And I think there's two distinct groups of people that move. They say is their intention to do it permanently, and that is, there's a group that move with the notion that we'll see how it goes, and they often call it the plan B. They move to another country, and we'll see how this goes for a few years, and we'll go from there. But then there's another group who are like hardcore. This is it, and the places that you and I came from, we saw a lot of people come from other countries, and that was it. That wasn't their plan B for various reasons. They had a suitcase, one-way ticket, and 100% they were going to make it or not or break it. And I think that's a really big part of, I guess, getting your head around which camp are you in? Because if you are, for whatever reason, if it's because of, say, the amount of resources you have or whatever, if you are in the camp that are pretty much a one-way ticket, this is it, I think there are some things that you really need to work on. And just myself, long time ago, I stopped calling the place I came from home. I stopped saying, oh, back home, because I just found it was really regressive for myself. And it wasn't, I just felt like it was just keeping me stuck and sort of maybe in some ways creating a bit of a bad attitude, because it's sort of, I don't know, it sounds like you are taking for granted your new home. So, I always recommend people to sort of just think about what they're saying and how they're identifying with their new home, or is it their new home?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I guess being stuck in that kind of constant comparison is not very helpful sometimes. But yeah, I mean, the other question is like, where is home when you've lived abroad? And sometimes people move multiple times, so what does it mean anymore? Or is it where you're from? Is it where you live now? Is it, where you feel places are familiar? It's and how also do you create that sense of home in your new country? That's something to work on, right? Sometimes if you're not feeling at home, how can you build that within yourself?
Yeah.
Or within relationships, for example,
Yeah. And I think also, for people as old as me, I do see not infrequently that we romanticize, the place that we came from. And, the home that we think we're missing sometimes kind of doesn't exist. And I had a profound example that I went to a particular part of Australia a number of years ago after living away from there for years. And that was the most extreme sense of just culture shock, really, because it was nothing even remotely like what it was when I had been there several years prior. So, I kind of had a romantic notion going back there just to find that it was as different as where I am now. And I actually think that really was a good experience for me, because it allowed me to kind of put some things to rest. My country is not like it was, and so I don't so much romanticize about going back to what I see in my mind as home, because it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like often when we look back, it's like maybe with some rose tinted glasses or with, certain memories that are very, sentimental to us. But all places are always changing. Yeah, and I guess it seems like you experienced quite a bit of was it not culture shock, but when you returned to your house, your previous
Reverse
home.
culture shock.
Reverse culture shock, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I guess it also reflects some of those internal changes that you like are more aware of your culture to begin with, or the culture of the country where you were originally from. From being outside of it, you can see it from an outsider's perspective almost,
Mm.
Yeah. So you kind of like, but by living several different cultures, you can learn to identify some of the differences, and you experience those differences. And it's not that one's better than another, but they're just different, and
Mm.
can feel a bit like over time that you don't really belong anywhere, right? So you're kind of
Yeah.
a foreign in your home country or original country.
Mm.
Also almost always going to be a foreigner in your adopted country. So yeah, it can be quite challenging to come to terms with those. Like, I'm always going to be a foreigner, and when will I belong, and how will I
Yeah.
belong? Make that happen for myself.
Yeah. And I think when you're in a place so foreign, it's
Mhm.
like, the movie where the person goes out into the desert to find themselves. You really are in a kind of desert in a different type of way, in the sense that you are in a very strange and unfamiliar environment. And so a lot of the things that, maybe weren't really at the front of your mind really have a way of coming to the surface. And
Mhm.
one of them is definitely your sense of identity. Me personally, I've gone through a real process in some ways of deconstructing my sense of identity, because I've come to realize that there's quite a significant part of it that was handed to me for various reasons. And I think that our cultural identity is, to quite an extent, manipulated
Mhm.
in different ways and for different reasons. But I've found it to be a generally healthy thing to re-examine who you think you are and what your attitudes and views and everything about it, because you have some startling realities in that process that it can be healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I would say that like living abroad is definitely it has its challenges in terms of your identity, because you do kind of go through like you said, a deconstruction in a way, or even like a death of some parts of yourself, like
Mm.
leaving behind some parts of yourself that are like that made sense in that context, but here it doesn't make sense, right? So that also rebuilding and retrying different things, that are trying different beliefs, different attitudes or values, that or even just activities and interests that like you wouldn't have ever tried back in your original country potentially. It's just based on the environment and the opportunities and the new culture. So yeah, it's a process. And I think actually that's our in general in life, our identity is always evolving, but it really moving country is like a huge disruption to our identity in a way. That is a disruption, but also in a good way, because it helps you grow and helps you evolve.
Yeah. You have to, I guess, develop quite a robust sense of self to be able to accept the reality that you're kind of a nowhere, you're a no one in a way, in a sense, like, who am I?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly. Who am I
Zoolander.
now? Am I going to
Yeah,
be? Who do I
yeah,
want to be? At least you can ask these things, and maybe having to go through that, you also have a sense of, okay, maybe I have a choice in who I want to be. And with that comes some freedom, but also responsibility. And that responsibility to make a choice, so much choice in our own lives, can also bring anxiety, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, everything's connected, right? But it's also, yeah, some things like very positive, involving, changing, but also very tough, in
yeah,
many
yeah,
ways.
yeah. And you touch on something, and that is fear, because
Mhm.
a lot of people move to Paraguay because there is a relative sense of freedom here in many ways. Uh, what we see quite frequently is that leads to a certain anxiety, because with freedom comes choices and consequences. And some people really struggle with that. And I find that really an interesting phenomenon, and I imagine that would be a relatively common thing that you may see in people, just that fear of, what do I do and how do I make this new life in this free situation?
Yeah, when you have like the freedom to choose your next path, or how, you have that open to choose who you're going to be, yeah, it has a lot of pressure on it to get it right?
Mm,
Like
mm,
to choose the right path. And if I choose the wrong path, then maybe, I'm going to fail myself or something,
mm.
So there's a sense of needing to know almost like, am I on the right path? Or, yeah, so like all the uncertainty bring of like, and also there's the kind of needing to know or needing to feel like, we're building a life of meaning can bring a lot of anxiety. Yeah, for sure. And fear.
And I imagine in your work, it would not be uncommon to come across people who are dealing with that. But, you know, there's also the reality that we all bring our own baggage. We all have, past traumas, whatever it is, that probably like a dentist checkup, and you don't really know until you go to the dentist, what's ailing you.
Yeah.
When it's not until you're faced with, I guess, challenging situations that you can find that you may have unhelpful patterns that have been put in place by an event long past. So I suspect that that'd be something else that you might not infrequently perhaps have to in some way address.
I think it's something, in counseling is helping the client to become more aware of, yeah, their patterns, where they think their ways of responding to situations are coming from sometimes, like sometimes it's from an experience in childhood that it don't even remember.
Mm,
And when so when in session, you might be like, okay, I am feeling anxious, for example. And you ask the client, okay, so where are you feeling that in your body? And like trying to like really notice how it feels. Because a lot of the time we don't want to feel our emotions, especially when they're uncomfortable. So we try to like dissociate from them and distract ourselves and stay busy and not feel and that generally keeps them there longer, right? So it's good to be able to like just tune in to our emotions and where they are, and also see if there's any memories that like come up, like, okay, have I felt this before when I was young? Like just ask yourself randomly, quietly that question and see what comes up. So sometimes a random memory that you didn't even know you remembered
mm.
is there, right there, and you're like, wow, I'm like 7 years old again, and this was happening, and that's the time I felt like this, and like you really feel that connection from that childhood moment to this moment right now,
Yeah.
and how it's like your subconscious is still producing the similar responses to different situations, but in a patterned way.
Either those things that happen to us or the things that we've taken into our conscious and subconscious about certain things. An example is, being pulled up by the police. It's
Mhm.
quite common in South America. You'll get a roadside stop.
Yeah.
And what we have found, not infrequently, is that that can cause massive anxiety amongst people that we know that come here because, we've seen movies or heard things about certain other countries. And it's just an example of how we sometimes just take things into our mind. We
Exactly.
usually
Yeah.
often don't know even where they came from. And we have this kind of response to a situation where in Paraguay, for example, it's no real big deal. You will get pulled up. There's certain rules you have to follow. If you do happen to break them, there'll be a fine. It won't be huge, but that's it. You're not going to come to major grief. They're not out to cause you harm. But that template of what we've seen on TV or heard about the way that turns out in other countries,
Mhm.
it's really unhelpful because
Yeah.
it's a kind of a false memory because it didn't even really happen to us. It's just a perception that we have.
Yeah, and it happens, like our minds are pattern making machines as well, right? We make like we take some information and like generalize from that, because that means that it makes it easier for us to process information, right? And
Yeah.
also to process danger. Like we're also always looking for danger.
Mm,
So yeah, it makes sense that sometimes we might see something on the news and about another country and we like, oh, that's what it's like there, But
mm.
I mean, the beautiful thing about living abroad is you get to see for real what it's like living somewhere else. And and realize that a lot of our assumptions that we had previously were probably, false or over exaggerated, let's say.
Mm.
So yeah, it's definitely, I don't know what I would, like necessarily say in this situation, like how to cope with that anxiety, except, living through the experience of going through it and for the first time and realizing like, okay, it's actually okay. I don't need to worry. That maybe that can be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the most useful things you can do is just simply breathe and
Hmm.
let the thing unfold.
Yeah.
As
And let yourself feel what you feel. Like, okay,
yeah,
you feel anxious. As long as it's not leading to like a, full-on panic attack, you're probably gonna be okay. It's just okay to keep going in your actions that you need to take and acknowledge that you're feeling anxious and like,
mm.
and then keep going and see if you can get through it, okay, I can handle this, it also builds confidence.
And it's like driving here in Paraguay. When you come across a situation that's challenging, I
Mhm.
just simply slow down and wait for the other drivers to work out what they're going to do. Whereas, if you're driving in some other countries, you might freak out or, because you feel like, that person might react in a really, sort of particular way. So just
Mhm.
even things like everyday traveling around and things, you have to recalibrate the way that you think other people are thinking even.
Yeah,
It's so
true.
complex.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing that I imagine you would see not infrequently are the dynamics that come when people move as a couple or a family. And it's a very common thing that I see that, there's a mismatch in the way that people will
Yes.
find the new place and, assimilate or not assimilate.
I don't actually work with whole families. So it's something not something I usually just work with individuals, right? So but I can see how that could easily happen, like not everybody's going to adjust at the same time or, in the same way. And even in each individual place is so different and like each person's experience is different, right? So it is an individual process.
The other thing that I often see with people that move to a country is they struggle with the reality that they're going to have to live in a certain state of uncertainty for
Mm.
years. Now, we've been away for over 3 years, and there are still aspects of our move that are in motion, logistical issues and different things relating to setups and, still, really perfecting the language. So there's all sorts of loose ends, and that can create a real level of anxiety because when you're in the place that you once called home, you've got most of those things tied up in a bow. But there are actually usually a lot of things that are hanging out there yet to be done. But I think we tend to feel more secure. But when we're in a new
Yeah.
country, it's all like, oh, yeah, and I just encourage people to just find a way to be comfortable with being in a state of uncertainty, whether it's I've got my temporary resident permit, but I haven't got my permanent one yet, or I've got my permanent, but I'm waiting for my cedula. There's always something, but I sort of try and encourage people to just not stress too much.
Yeah. No, like when there is uncertainty, it often comes with anxiety, right? Because like
Yeah.
it's a natural response to, especially when it comes to like, whether you can actually stay there long term. I can imagine that's like, if that's what someone really wants and like they need that, to feel safe in their life, I can imagine why that will cause a lot of anxiety. And I guess with when I work with clients, it's always like try to notice what your thoughts are doing, right? Because like
Mm.
um, we're always we're always talking, not talking to ourselves, but we're always having thoughts, right? And sometimes we can get really hooked by our thoughts, and that can lead us down into a spiral of, anxiety, for example. So yeah, just try to notice like what am I actually telling myself and what am I feeling? Like pay attention. And is this leading to behaviors that are like helpful or not helpful? Like, are my thoughts actually being helpful to me?
Mm.
And do I need to go rabbit hole every time?
Yeah. And
Or can I have these thoughts and learn how to, just allow them to come up as they do, and allow anxiety to come as it comes, and yet still choose to be present in my life, and still choose to do things that are meaningful to me, and live according to my values, and just kind of embrace that sense of like, there's maybe it's not going to go away. Maybe this anxiety and this uncertainty is a part of my life now, and I have to learn some skills on how to embrace that rather than fight against it.
yeah. And I guess that's where counselling comes in, because it
Yeah.
really is about being able to speak to someone who's not necessarily going to just freak out with me because they feel like they have to, but you'll present an objective perspective.
Yeah.
And particularly
Yeah.
people moving by themselves, and I guess that sort of, the danger is that they look for their reflection in places like social media groups. They're looking for uh, different perspectives uh, of uh, of what they're thinking or what they're going through. And I'm really cautious with social media groups. I think that they're generally, they're often dominated by people who want to reinforce, either negativity or fear,
Yeah.
misinformation, a whole lot of things. So I always encourage people to be careful about what they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely I can see the temptation to want to see if others are experiencing what you're experiencing, for example, like you, like personally, but like what someone might be experiencing when they're arriving in a new country. They want to ask others if they've been through this too, like to feel less alone.
Mm.
But yeah, online sometimes that can be helpful, and sometimes it can be detrimental, and it really depends on who's in the group and how it's moderated, and how it's yeah, if people are generally polite, or they can be quite cruel. So yeah, it really depends on that online community, I think. But yeah, I think working with a therapist, or even talking in person with other people who have maybe been through this, moving experience, can be beneficial, because I think we don't really talk about what we're going through psychologically, because it might not even be so conscious. Like it might just sort of be like underlying everything, but everything else, like the logistics, and even like work stress, or relationship stress, is like on top of that even. So um yeah, it's sort of like the context on which we're all operating on, so that we might not even know how much is actually affecting us.
So it really is like getting a service on your car. You've got to keep your attitude in check. And there have been a number of times in our journey, all
Mhm.
four of our family members, where you can see you've got to a certain point, and there might be just a gear grinding in your mind that's just, and you need to be sorted out one way or another. Hopefully, just with a nice,
Yeah.
gentle sort of reminder that the world is still a
Mm.
great place, and you're in a great country, and however it comes to you, you sometimes need a reality check from someone else, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, like, if we get really caught up in our minds and our emotions, and it takes us out of our present moment, right? And then we can't really be in the place where we are, or in the moment that we are. We're too worried about the future, or we're too hooked by the past. And yeah, so I think gaining some skills, even in how to just have what we have, and experience what we have, like have what we have internally come up,
Yeah.
and allow it to be there, but also connect with what's where we are right now.
I really appreciate what you're doing, and I know that you're really needed in this world, because I've come across a lot of people, and if I had your number, I would have said maybe you need to speak to Georgia, because it is a reality, and definitely has
Yeah.
been for our family. Everyone I know has been through it and continues to. So, I appreciate what you do. So if anyone wanted to reach out and contact you, how would they do that?
I think the best way would be just through my website. So it's georgiamurphyonlinetherapy.com. Yeah, if anyone wants to book a session or find out more about me or even ask a question, they can use the contact form there on the website, and I'll get back to them.
That's awesome, Georgia. Well, I hope you continue to enjoy Guatemala.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you so much. Yeah, and I hope one day I'll come to Paraguay one day.
yeah,
I
you're
hope.
welcome anytime. Well, thanks very much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll talk again soon, or we might see you here in Paraguay. So until next time, take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Smoking room.